should be aloof from all other conceptions of life, thus realizing freedom from false ego. One should see his own soul just as he sees the sun in the sky. That's a nice statement. Just as he sees the sun in the sky. Purport. Consciousness acts in three stages under the material conception of life. When we are awake, consciousness acts in a particular way. When we are asleep, it acts in a different way. And when we are in deep sleep, consciousness acts in still another way. To become Krishna conscious, one has to become transcendental to these three stages of consciousness. Our present consciousness should be freed from all perceptions of life other than consciousness of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is called Duri Bhutanya Darshana, which means that when one attains perfect Krishna consciousness, he does not see anything but Krishna. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that the perfect devotee may see many movable and immovable objects, but in everything he sees, he sees that the energy of Krishna is active. As soon as he remembers the energy of Krishna, he immediately remembers Krishna in his personal form. That's a very nice statement right there. As soon as he remembers the energy of Krishna, he immediately remembers Krishna in his personal form. Therefore, in all his observations, he sees Krishna only. In the Brahma Samhita 538, it is stated that when one's eyes are smeared with love of Krishna, Premanjana Churita, he always sees Krishna outside and inside. This is confirmed here. One should be freed from all other vision, and in that way, he is freed from the false egotistic identification and sees himself as the eternal servitor of the Lord. Chaksu Sevarkam, as we can see the sun without a doubt. One who is fully developed in Krishna consciousness sees Krishna and his energy. By this vision, one becomes Atmadrik, or self-realized. When the false ego of identifying with the body, or the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. The senses, therefore, also become purified. Real service to the Lord begins with the senses. That begins when the senses are purified. One does not have to stop the activities of the senses, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses automatically become purified, and with purified senses, one can actually discharge devotional service. Okay. And so this is very interesting. It says, as soon as he remembers the energy of Krishna, he immediately remembers Krishna in his personal form. Therefore, in all his observations, he sees Krishna only. That's a very good statement. Brahma Samhita 538 is stated that when one's eyes are smeared with love of Krishna, Premanjana, Churita, Bhakti, so forth, he always sees Krishna outside and inside. That means that inside Krishna is present as Paramatma. Outside, Krishna is also present in the heart of all living entities and in everything. So inside and outside, one sees Krishna. And that's why it says, therefore, in all his observations, he sees Krishna only. In the Brahma Samhita 538, it is stated that when one's eyes are smeared with love of Krishna, Premanjana Charita, he always sees Krishna outside and inside. This is confirmed here. Okay, so seeing Krishna inside and outside. Inside, he is Paramatma, and outside, he sees the Paramatma in the body of every living entity and in everything, trees and bugs, everywhere he sees Krishna. That's the universal vision of the Lord's very important state. Uh, and even though you might not be able to actually see that, you should at least theoretically believe it. And then eventually you actually also see it. Okay, so Premanjana Charita is a nice verse which says that, when one has love for Krishna, he can see Krishna everywhere, outside and inside. Okay. So the senses, therefore, also become purified. How is that? When the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. Okay, now practically, what does that mean? Well, from my own experience, when I stopped identifying myself by being an Armenian and understood that that's just a temporary identification. The real identification is I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. So now I'm not identifying with the circumstantial body, but I'm identifying myself as part and parcel of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's the truth. That's who we actually are. We are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And we should act that way by engaging in devotional service and always remembering and serving Krishna in many, many different ways, and serving devotees and serving humanity in general by trying to chant Hare Krishna and spread Krishna consciousness. So this, what you would call exclusiveness, saying, well, I'm this, I'm a member of this family, I'm a member of this ethnic group, I'm a member of this neighborhood or whatever. Those are all false identifications. And that's why it says that this, it says, one should be freed from all other vision. And in that way, he is freed from the false egotistic identification and sees himself as the eternal servitor of the Lord. Chakshusevar Kama. As we can see the sun without a doubt, one who is fully developed in Krishna consciousness sees Krishna and his energy. By this vision, one becomes Atmadrik, or self-realized. When the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. The senses, therefore, also become purified. Real service of the Lord begins when the senses are purified. Well, how do you purify the senses? You keep them engaged in devotional service of Krishna. One does not have to stop the activities of the senses, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses automatically become purified. And with purified senses, one can actually discharge devotional service. Very nice statement, very nice purport. And the verse of this purport says, one should be situated in the transcendental position beyond the stages of material consciousness and should be aloof from all other conceptions of life. In other words, identifying yourself in other ways and by identifying with the body, identifying with this group of people or that group of people. Thus, realizing freedom from false ego, one should see his own self just as he sees the sun in the sky. In other words, all the darkness of ignorance goes away, and one understands the real, let's say, identity. Uh, what is the real identity? I'm the eternal servant of Krishna, and I am meant for engaging in the service of the Lord and also serving humanity by spreading Krishna consciousness. Now, one achieves their real identity. All these things, like uh, different. There's different identifications people have. Uh, just like someone says they are American, another person says no, they are South American. Another person says no, no, I'm a North American. So all these different identities are actually false. We're all the eternal servants of Krishna. It doesn't matter whether you're born in the north or the south or the east or the west. And your identification is not geographical. Your identification is transcendental to everything. And I like this statement Prabhupada says, real service of the Lord begins when the senses are purified. One does not have to stop the activities of the senses, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses automatically become purified. And with purified senses, one can actually discharge devotional service. Okay, that is, I remember one time, many, many years ago, the night Prabhupada left his body. So I was up all the night, that whole night, just chanting Hare Krishna. And the leader of our, let's say, temple uh, was up also, but he didn't come to the temple room. He stayed in his office. And late at night, I think around 3 or 4 o'clock, I went to see him, to ask him, why don't you come down? Everybody's chanting Hare Krishna, and it'd be nice if you'd come down. But he didn't really hear me. He was just sitting there with a little bit of a smile on his face, and he didn't notice me or hear me. So I just stood there for a couple of minutes, and eventually he did start speaking, but he wasn't exactly speaking to me. Or in other words, he didn't realize who I was. He thought I was maybe somebody else. And what he said was, let me try and remember exactly. It's something like, well, now uh, Prabhupada has left his body, and now uh, I, was it, did he say I? Yeah, I think he said, now I am going to be, like spiritual master. And he said, because Prabhupada had stated like I think 11 people that would be like spiritual masters after departed, and he said, and I think he said like 6 or 8 of the spiritual masters are Jews. And when he said that, uh, then he noticed me standing there, and then I heard that, and Then he, went silent. But what was he thinking? He was identifying with the body and was proud of it. Right? And that went on for a long time until he fell down. Because although he was very smart, uh, and he's a leader, he had many, many disciples after Prabhupada disappeared, but he fell down because he could not break his false identification with the body. All right, so he's identifying himself as Jewish instead of identifying himself as uh, the eternal servant of Krishna. So, because of that inability to free himself from that false identification, he fell down, not right away, but over time. Okay. So, are there any questions about this purport?
So I was once in one yoga program that was Nityananda back in the day.
Nityananda Harivilas.
uh,
I should call him Nityanandit, not Nityananda. Nityanandit.
Nandit.
It's a Nandit.
So the way they kind of because here Prabhupada says like there is a they kind of describe this chart of four states of awareness. There is the state of being awake, state of asleep, deep sleep, and then there is the Turiya, they call it the
Fourth dimension,
fourth dimension.
where everything is eternal and unending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they said that, different people brand it different ways. Some people brand it as Krishna consciousness, some people brand it as uh, so basically they're trying to say that there's only these four states of our awakening, our consciousness, and then this fourth state is that state that so they're saying something similar, but they don't further distinguish between us and the Lord, and they simply say that okay, if you are,
They become God.
yeah, they become, that's their
That's the
definition
fourth
of
stage.
God.
Yeah.
But here only through Bhagavatam you will really understand that seeing that way doesn't mean that you're actually God. You're actually at that point towards the end. Prabhupada says that's when you can actually discharge pure devotional service. And even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also says that Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kankshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate. So Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita clearly are articulating that at that stage is when we do the pure devotional service.
Yes.
But those people take out the devotional service and then say, okay, that is the state. That is the ultimate state. I'm just trying to contrast how they're misleading people and let's get to that state. That is enough.
Prabhu, I had a question on that. Uh, so this Turiya, this is all mentioned in Mandukya Upanishad, right? So if we are referring to Shastras and Mandukya Upanishad is saying this, then how should we think about it? Forget about Nityananda or whoever else is talking about it, but Upanishad is saying.
Are you talking about the fourth dimension?
Yes. It is given in the Mandukya Upanishad.
Okay. What is your question about it?
So question is, how do we reconcile Mandukya Upanishad with let's say, Ishopanishad or something else, right? So, sure, that
You have to,
yeah.
you have to understand what the fourth dimension is. The fourth dimension, or Turiya, means everything becomes infinite. You're no longer subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. And so you enter into the transcendental life of immortality. That's my understanding of the fourth dimension. Now I might be wrong, I don't know, but that's my understanding of it. Because we live in three dimensions: length, width, and breadth. But the fourth dimension means that length, width, and breadth expands eternally or infinitely. So that everything becomes immortal. Everything is eternal. I'm sorry. So there is a spiritual world and there's a material world. In the material world, everything is temporary. In the spiritual world, everything is eternal. So that fourth dimension where everything is eternal is the spiritual world. So we live in three dimensions, but we can enter the fourth dimension through Krishna consciousness and regulated devotional service. And then we no longer identify with the body, but we identify with our service to Krishna and our subordinate position to Krishna and service. So then life becomes eternal because at the moment of death, if we've been always remembering Krishna during lifetime, there's a good chance that we'll remember Krishna at the moment of death, and then we go back to Godhead. Now we've attained the fourth dimension of eternal life. That's why it says here, when the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. The senses, therefore, also become purified. Real service to the Lord begins when the senses are purified. One does not have to stop the activities of the senses, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses automatically become purified, and with purified senses, one can actually discharge devotional service. And therefore, one will engage their whole body, mind, soul, everything in the service of Krishna. At the moment of death, they remember Krishna and they go back to Godhead for eternal life. So the real, let's say, point where one becomes transcendentally conscious is when the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. Okay, then that has a big meaning, actual vision of life. You see yourself not as the body, but you see yourself as the soul that is animating the body with consciousness. And it's that consciousness purified by devotional service. Now you perceive yourself as the eternal servant of Krishna. And if you act as the eternal service of Krishna, that's where it says, the senses therefore also become purified. Real service to the Lord begins when the senses are purified. That means you don't no longer identify with the body, but you identify yourself as the eternal servant of Krishna. One does not have to stop the activities of the senses. I'm sorry, one does not have to stop the activities of the senses, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses automatically become purified. And with purified senses, one can actually discharge devotional service. So as soon as we stop identifying with the material body or some material identity, I'm North American or I'm South American or I'm West American or North American or whatever. No, I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. It's not geographical. It is transcendental identification of oneself as the eternal servant of Krishna, at that time, real service of the Lord begins, when the senses are purified. So that's interesting, you see. Now, many people are doing some service, right? They're doing altruistic activities, and they also distribute food. We're not the only ones that are distributing food, but the difference of what we're doing and what the mundane people are doing when they distribute food is we're distributing prasadam that's been offered first to Krishna and then given back as his prasadam, and then now distributing that prasadam with love and devotion. It was also cooked with love and devotion, so forth, and offered with love and devotion. So there's a difference. I mean, there are other people that serve free food. I don't see too many, but there are other people that do that, or they do it once a year at Thanksgiving or something like that. But the difference is uh, we're not. We are doing it. We are first offering the food to Krishna. So what we're distributing is not actually food. Uh, it's the supernatural now product of love for Krishna that we're distributing. And so if people eat prasadam, and if we have offered it correctly and purely to Krishna, it becomes prasadam. It changes their life. And we've seen that. People change from being materialistically, trapped by Maya to becoming devotees, or at least becoming favorable to devotees and appreciating the service that we're doing on a regular basis. So when it says here, when the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. I like that. Actual vision of life. Everybody is living, right? And they have some vision of life, but their vision of life is actually materialistic. Therefore, they're not actually seeing properly. Everything is dependent on how you see things. Like, for example, a mother or father sees a child with love, or at least with some responsibility of protection. A child molester sees the same child, but not like the mother or father, but with the desire to exploit the child for his or her own sense gratification. So two people are seeing the same thing, but they're not seeing the correctly. Even the mother or father sees a child with protection and love, but they don't see the child as a spirit soul. They see the child's body, so that's still material life, right? Uh, so if you see the child and your main activity is going skiing with the child, going, water sports with the child or whatever, uh, you're not actually seeing the child properly. But if you take the child regularly to the temple and sit together and take part in the program, see, that's important. Uh, Even in our temple, uh, usually, no, I don't know all the time, but a lot of times children are running wild outside, and the parents are inside sitting down and hearing the lecture or taking part in the kirtan or whatever. So that's a very bad example. The child should always be with the parents sitting down in the temple throughout the whole program, not outside running wild and screaming. Whenever that's happening, it means that the managers of the temple are sleeping. The children have to be engaged in the Sunday school, and even it's not that as soon as Sunday school is over, they go outside and start running around. It's not good. They have to be in the full program with their parents. So the parents that let their children run wild in the temple, they are not properly guiding their children. These children should not be running around wild in the temple. The temple is not a place for gymnastics or screaming or whatever. So the children should always, whether they're in the Sunday school or after Sunday school, they should be in the arti or hearing the class, sitting with their parents. Okay, I hope some of the leaders of our movement is hearing that. Hare Krishna. This whole, this whole sort of idea that, as soon as the Sunday school is over, they go outside and start running around and screaming and talking nonsense and whatever. That should stop immediately. The temple is not a place, it's not a playground. It's a place where you become serious about Krishna consciousness. And that seriousness means you're hearing properly. You learn to hear properly. Focus on hearing about who Krishna is and engaging in service to the Lord. So then, after you go home, if you want to run around and scream, that's okay, but not in a temple. That running around is not the sign of a enlightened temple. It's a sign of ignorance on the part of the managers. Haribol.
I think the specific question who asked was about Mandukya Upanishad only talks about Kriya, doesn't talk about devotional service, whereas Isa Upanishad is all about devotional service, because there we specifically pray to the Lord that please remove your glaring effulgence so that I can see you and then remember.
See your smiling face.
Yeah. So I just asked Vedabis Chat GPT to see what.
The Chat GPT is the elephant in the room. We don't see the elephant, but he's there. Okay, go ahead.
So it actually kind of compiled in a very nice way. So the Mandukya Upanishad, like other Upanishads, focuses primarily on philosophical and metaphysical aspects of reality, especially the nature of Brahman and the self.
Nature of Brahman and what? The sun?
And the self.
And the self, yeah.
And then it emphasizes the four states of consciousness: waking, or Jagrat, dreaming, Swapna, deep sleep, Sushupti, and the fourth transcendental state called Turiya. The purpose of the Upanishads is generally to establish the non-dual spiritual reality as the basis of everything, which often leans towards the impersonal understanding.
No, that's Mayavad.
Yeah, this is basically Mayavad, that's what. But then the next it says, Srila Prabhupada's perspective on Upanishads. Srila Prabhupada explains that while the Upanishads contain profound philosophical teachings, they primarily emphasize the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth. They do not always explicitly describe the personal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or devotional service bhakti. This is because Upanishads were intended for highly advanced seekers who were ready to renounce the material world and seek liberation.
Well, you have to understand, Upanisha in Sanskrit, that means that you're beginning to come closer to the Lord.
Yeah.
But you haven't fully developed.
Yeah.
But it's the beginning of your journey that you're gradually coming closer to the Lord. Yeah, go ahead.
So then, how Srila Prabhupada repeatedly states that the ultimate understanding of the absolute truth is personal. not merely impersonal. In Bhagavad Gita 7.24, Krishna says, Avyaktam vyaktimapannam manyante mam abuddhaya. That verse, unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this form. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. So the Upanishads represent just the Jnana Khanda, or the path of knowledge of the Vedas, focusing on the liberation through the knowledge. But this impersonal understanding of the Supreme leads to an incomplete realization. Srila Prabhupada refers to this as Brahman realization, which is only the first stage of the understanding of the absolute truth.
Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan.
Bhagavan, yes. Why devotional service bhakti is not explicitly stated in Mandukya Upanishad? Mandukya Upanishad stops at the realization of the Turiya, which aligns with the impersonal Brahman realization. This realization focuses on negating the material states of consciousness to reach a state of pure awareness. However,
Pure what?
state of pure awareness.
Yeah.
However, the personal aspect of Godhead, Bhagavan, and the loving devotional service bhakti are higher truths revealed in texts like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated the absolute truth is realized in three phases of understanding: Brahman, the impersonal,
Paramatma,
Paramatma, the localized, and Bhagavan, the
Bhagavan.
supreme personality of Godhead. The Mandukya Upanishad focuses only on the Brahman aspect of the absolute truth. Here is the main important statement. The Upanishads are like stepping stones to leading to higher realizations.
But that's if you have a guru.
Yes.
If you don't have a guru, you won't be able to go to this higher level. A bona fide guru, not a kangaroo, bona fide.
The full realization of the absolute truth comes through devotional service bhakti to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, as taught in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So now the role of bhakti in achieving also the Turiya state, which is a byproduct. Although Mandukya Upanishad does not explicitly mention bhakti, Srila Prabhupada teaches that the ultimate purpose of transcending material consciousness, reaching Turiya, is to awaken one's loving devotional service to Krishna.
That's not explained.
However, in Bhagavad Gita,
Mayavadi.
yeah, but explicitly Krishna states this in 1855. One can understand me, bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattva. That is, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service.
Yeah.
And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God.
Right.
Devotional service is the ultimate purpose of all Vedic literature. The Upanishads, including Mandukya Upanishad, point towards liberation, but Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam complete the journey by explaining how to engage in eternal blissful service of the Supreme Lord in the transcendental state. So,
yeah, when it says it, they point to that's not clear. It's okay. It's just like if you say, "I'm trying to go to New York. Can you help me?" Yeah.
Go east.
Yeah, go east, something like that. It's just pointing, right? In Bhakti Yoga, it takes you there.
Very well. That's the.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. That was very clear. That was good. Thank you.
Maharaj, one follow-up question.
Yes.
Follow, but on a similar line. It says about the three stages: awake, asleep, and deep sleep. And then it says to become Krishna consciousness, one has to become transcendental to these three stages of consciousness. So my question is, during awake stage, we try to use our intelligence, and regardless what mind thinks, we try to ignore and follow the Krishna consciousness. But in asleep state, it's all mixed up. Like sometimes Krishna conscious thoughts are there in a sleep state, sometimes material. So how we will be like transcendental in that stage?
Well, it's what you're doing. That's why every day we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. I had a friend of mine who used to be a devotee. So when I saw him after some time, we were very close friends, and he was a person who helped me become a devotee. And over time, he sort of left Krishna consciousness. So when I saw him, I said, Prabhu, how are you? He said, oh, I'm doing okay. I said, are you chanting Hare Krishna? I said, yes. Once a year on New Year's Eve, I chant one time, Hare Krishna. He said, see, I'm not like you, just mechanically going, Hare, Hare, Hare. I'd say it once on New Year's Eve, but full attention. So, did Prabhupada say that? No, Prabhupada said, even if you're not chanting properly, still you should continue chanting. You should never stop chanting. And this guy's trying to tell me, I only chant once on New Year's Eve, but when I chant, I do it with full, attention, right? So, there are a lot of phony people that try to uh, cheat you out of being a regular devotee, by saying things like that, He only chants once on New Year's Eve, but his one time chanting on New Year's Eve is worth more than all the chanting we're doing all year round, In other words, you say you guys are just chanting mechanically. I chant seriously or sincerely once on New Year's Eve. But Prabhupada never said that. Yeah. Okay. What's a nice statement here is when the false ego of identifying the body with the self is removed, actual vision of life is perceivable. Well, everyone's seeing, everyone has eyes and ears, but you have to get rid of the false ego to see properly. And and it's not only getting rid of the false ego, but becoming conscious of the necessity to chant and follow the regulative principles every day, and develop, gradually this steady Krishna consciousness day after day, and eventually developing pure love for Krishna and never being able to forget Krishna in any situation that you're in. So one does not have to stop the activities of the sense, but the false ego of identifying with the body has to be removed. Then the senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, etc., automatically become purified, and with purified senses, one can actually discharge devotional service. So the that's a very good statement. Simply, let's say, theoretically, being, you know, a devotee is different than actually being a devotee. Actually being a devotee is actually discharging devotional service. Then the senses become purified. Just having, oh, I'm initiated, Prabhupada initiated me in 1951, and I've been a devotee all these years. Well, what's the person doing? You're just living at home and watching television or something, or coming, once a year in the Janmashtami to the temple. So, uh, is the person actually following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, every day, not just once a day, once a year. And associating with devotees is another principle that we have to follow on a daily basis. So real service to the Lord begins when the senses are purified. Okay, does that mean if you're just a newcomer and you're engaging in devotional service, you're not actually engaged in real devotional service? This is a question that has been asked many times and debated by devotees. Anybody who engages in devotional service, they are actually purified, right? The whole idea of devotional service is to purify a person. So, but some people say yes, but they're not really purely saying the holy name. So you see, did you ever hear Prabhupada say that? Yeah. This is the question he asked, because there are some devotees that say, well, you're chanting the holy name, but you're not chanting it purely because you might still have material desires, so you're not actually chanting it purely. But the holy name is pure, right? And if you're chanting the holy name, even though you might have impure desires, still the holy name is pure. It's not. It's not. Let's say something that is contaminated. But if you're chanting like a snake that touches milk, it contaminates the milk. So someone who chants Hare Krishna but without any devotion to Krishna, does that mean that the Maha Mantra chanted by that person has become poisonous? No. It's just that the mentality of that person is poisonous. How can you say that the holy name becomes poisonous? It's not true. But the mentality of the person can be poisonous. So we have to be careful when we're talking about pure devotional service or pure chanting of Hare Krishna. Many times there are people that say that, okay, you're chanting Hare Krishna, and so forth like that, but you're not chanting the pure name. You're not chanting the pure Nam of the Lord. So this is okay. So have you ever read anywhere where Prabhupada says something like that? That when you're chanting, but you're not chanting the pure name of the Lord. There are people that say that. And it's oftentimes people that are in other sampradayas or other, Krishna conscious type movements, they make this distinction between the pure chanting and the impure chanting. The chanting is chanting. Consciousness may be impure, but the chanting of the holy name is not impure. But the more you keep chanting, the more you'll get purified. So in no conditions should we stop chanting. In other words, some people are trying to make this point.
So don't chant until you get purified.
No, that because you're not chanting purely, you should not chant.
I think Prabhupada specifically gives the example of the medicine of jaundice. Like we are in the material contamination, like which is like a disease. And just like sugar candy is the medicine for a person inflicted with jaundice, and only by initially they won't like it, but he says like the more they continue to take that, eventually they get purified of the material consciousness, and then he in fact recommends that the holy name is the medicine, they continue to chant even with material desires, then eventually they get purified. Isn't it? That's what Prabhupada actually.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that there are nonsense people that'll tell you you're not chanting the pure name. Did Prabhupada ever say that? No.
There a small video in YouTube. Prabhupada says anybody can chant. There are no hard and fast rules.
Yeah. But he never said that don't chant because you're not chanting it purely. Okay, so but there are people that say, well, you're chanting, but you're not chanting the pure name.
Sometimes they give some technique as well, like syllable wise break this and that.
Yeah.
That how to chant properly.
Yeah.
And they go like syllable wise, like how to pronounce this. Weird ideas.
And then Prabhupada never said that.
I think there is one example I had, Maharaj, like what is the movie, Hindi movie where they kind of Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, something like that, the Hindi song, right? And Prabhupada asked, it seems, I mean, you might know Maharaj, like,
He said, did they say Hare Krishna? Yes, Prabhupada. He said, then it's okay.
exactly.
Even if they said the mantra backwards or half of it or whatever, but because they said Hare Krishna, it's okay then. Yeah. Or they're saying it by making fun of ISKCON, And he said, but did they chant Hare Krishna? Yes, Prabhupada. Then it's okay.
That's a good example, actually. Even though their intention was to make fun.
Yeah.
But still Prabhupada is saying it's okay.
Yeah. Because they said Hare Krishna. And the holy name is absolute. Doesn't depend on how you say it.
Yeah.
Even if you say it incorrectly, you still get purified.
And even the intention, so the intention was also not like purified.
Well, even if you're saying it out of making fun of chanting Hare Krishna, you're still chanting Hare Krishna. Okay? So you still get the benefits.
I think there's another one you only gave, Maharaj, like haram. Even the Muslims are making.
They're making a lot of devotional service. They're saying the name of Ram. But that was a discussion that
So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and
Haridas Thakur had. Lord Chaitanya one day was a little morose, and Haridas Thakur comes and said, "What's wrong?" He said, "How are we going to help these demons?" He was thinking, how are we going to, and he's referring mainly to the Muslims, how are we going to convert them to Krishna consciousness? And Haridas said, "Don't worry." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because they're saying every day Haram, Haram. That means they're chanting the names of the Lord. Hari Ram, Hari Ram." That was a discussion that Haridas Thakur had with Lord Chaitanya when Lord Chaitanya was sort of a little bit morose because he was trying to think, how are we going to, how are we going to make these demons into devotees? So he said, "Don't worry, my Lord. They're saying Haram. They're chanting the name of Lord Ram." Okay. Any more questions?
any more online. Yeah, I do not see any raised hands.
The real service point is the actual service is also it's not actual, but neophyte is doing any service like chanting or rendering any service for Krishna, even with the contaminated desires. Still, it's a purification is happening, and at the same time,
Prabhupada never said stop chanting. Even if you're not chanting properly, whatever, he said, never stop chanting.
my question is that is called devotion service as well, right? Even though it's
Imperfect chanting.
not just imperfect, but with imperfect desire or anything.
Mm.
It's still considered devotion. Is that the understanding?
Well, let's put it like this: that if you continue to chant and you don't stop, eventually you become purified, even if you're not saying the mantra correctly, but you're trying to say it. Like there was this one person, he was illiterate, but his guru told him that he should chant. He should, chant Hare Krishna, and because he was illiterate, he couldn't read, uh, so he would try to chant. Let's put it like that, and people would make fun of him because he wasn't chanting properly. So Lord Chaitanya comes and sees him, and he sees that he's trying to chant Hare Krishna, but he's not getting it right. And but he saw that he was crying, so he said, he said, what are you doing? He said, well, my guru told me I have to chant Hare Krishna, but I'm illiterate and I can't do it correctly. So Lord Chaitanya said, yes, but why are you crying? He said, well, whenever I think of the Maha Mantra, I remember how Krishna was humbling himself and helping his devotees, and taking a position subordinate to his devotees and serving the devotees. He said that when I remember that, it brings tears to my eyes. So Lord Chaitanya said, oh, now your chanting is perfect because you are thinking correctly about the and Prabhupada also says this. He says that we should meditate on the mercy of Lord Chaitanya instead of criticizing ISKCON. He said instead of criticizing ISKCON, you should meditate on the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya's mercy is for everyone. It's not collective. But if you are criticizing ISKCON because they don't do this or they don't do that, then you just become negative. But if you're always thinking about how merciful Lord Chaitanya is in spreading the holy name for everyone, that should bring tears to your eyes of appreciation of the Lord. So now you're not being negative, you're being positive. Right? So therefore, that's why it says here, as soon as he remembers the energy of Krishna, he immediately remembers Krishna in his personal form. Therefore, in all his observations, he sees Krishna only. Very nice statement. Premanjana Charita Bhakti, and so forth. It means that when you're purified, you're always seeing Krishna, outside and inside. That is the life of a devotee. Outside and inside, he's always seeing Krishna or remembering Krishna. Hare Krishna. Okay, any questions, comments? If not, then we will adjourn for 11 hours.
Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama.